the fact that it just suddenly appeared called into question whether the bridge was artificial. As soon as he announced this discovery, O'Neill was attacked by skeptical scientists. That was until famed British astronomer H.P. Wilkins confirmed that he too had seen the mysterious bridge. Later, astronomer Patrick Moore also reported seeing the structure. What is very odd about this strange story is that the bridge slowly began to disappear as if it were morphing into the surface of the moon. Now today, there is no trace of what these famous astronomers saw.
Well, there's a number of anomalies on the moon's surface that suggest that it's hollow. First are the craters themselves. Some of them are hundreds of miles in diameter, which would mean that you would have a very deep crater. But in fact, the crater is quite shallow, nowhere near deep enough. If you actually have an asteroid or comet of some sort impacting the moon, creating a 100-kilometer wide crater, you would expect the depth of that crater to go down 100 kilometers or more. But in fact, it only goes down much less than you would expect. I don't know the exact depth, but certainly enough that would make it very suspicious that beneath the moon's crust is a very hard exterior shell of some sort, some kind of metal that can withstand planetary impact by space debris, asteroids, and so forth. And so to me, that suggests that the moon is an artificial body and that it's on the interior of the moon that you actually have huge bases. And there are things about the moon in terms of, first of all, how can a body that is only a quarter the size of the Earth in diameter be captured by the Earth? I mean, in terms of conventional physics, it's not possible. It wouldn't be. It's too big. And then why would it be tidally locked? What that does is create an area of the moon, the far side, which can't be observed from the Earth. But for those on the moon that have advanced technologies, that have established bases underneath the moon, they could have all their ships parked on the far side of the moon, visiting the Earth, doing whatever they need to do, monitoring the Earth, without us ever knowing what's there.
Not only does it rotate in such a way as to always keep one face to the Earth, which is unusual enough, but possibly explained. But even stranger still is that when the moon eclipses the disk of the sun and transits it, it's a perfect eclipse. Our moon is of such a size and distance from the Earth that during an eclipse, the disk of the moon is transiting the disk of the sun. And during the complete eclipse, the moon disk is perfectly, not more and not less, covering the disk of our sun. Now that our moon is arbitrarily in that orbit to not more or not less eclipse the sun, but to perfectly eclipse the sun, would suggest that our moon is actually in an artificial orbit around our planet. Because to just capture some moon or even that it would just form, as the planet forms, in that orbit and that size, the odds are a zillion to 1.
The moon and the Earth are a weird system because they're so close in size. And so it's really rare for a body as small as the Earth with as minimal a gravitational field as it has to be able to actually lock a body like that into a tidal lock arrangement. It's very easy for Saturn and Jupiter, which are much more massive, to be able to maybe grab an object or even fission off a moon and keep it in a tidal locked relationship. So I wonder when I see that if maybe it wasn't moved in place and the Earth actually sort of robbed it of its spin momentum at some point, to the point that it now shows only one side of itself to the Earth. But it doesn't seem like an arrangement that could have come about naturally. It just doesn't really add up.
Scientists cannot agree on the origins of the moon. There are several theories, but none of them adequately explains everything concerning the moon. The first is the fission theory, which says that a chunk of the Earth broke off and condensed into the moon. The problem with this theory is that it does not explain the 4,000-degree baking that the moon's surface endured at some point in its past. If the moon had formed nearby the Earth, then our planet would have gone through this baking heat also, but there's no evidence for this on Earth. The second theory is the capture theory, in which the Earth somehow captured the moon as it was whizzing by. The problem with this theory is that it's unlikely because it would have had to happen in a very exact way, otherwise the moon would have crashed into the Earth. The third theory is the condensation theory that says the Earth and the moon condensed at the same time from material in the solar system. The problem with this theory is that if it were true, the moon would be as dense as the Earth. The fourth and most recent theory is that a planet like Mars crashed into the Earth, breaking off a chunk, which then reformed into the moon. The problem here is that the isotopes for the Earth and the moon are identical. This would not be the case if a planet had crashed into the Earth. So science is left in a quandary considering how the moon was created and how it arrived here. The biggest concern was the fact that the moon's density is far less than that of Earth. Though the moon is a little less than a third the size of the Earth, it weighs far less. The Earth is 81 times heavier than the moon. It is this fact that baffles scientists the most.
Of course, there's several different theories about how the moon was formed. One of them is that the Earth was hit by a Mars-sized object and all this stuff went out and gathered together at this particular orbit and then started circling around the Earth. But the bottom line is, if you actually look at the data, you can see that the moon is actually receding from the Earth, indicating that it may have actually been fissioned off by the Earth at one point. And the fact is that right now there's no really good theories for how the moon got there. We know the capture theory doesn't work. The fission theory has some issues, although it's my favorite, and the collision theory is just absolute nonsense because of the fact that the isotopic ratios of the lunar soil that we brought back, the elements in it, they match the Earth. That indicates that they're not from somewhere else. You'd have a mixture if the moon was actually formed from the Earth itself and another alien body.
There were two Russian scientists saying that they believed that the moon was a constructed body. They thought that it was a planetoid that had been hollowed out, and everything that was going on, basically, apart from some stuff on the surface on the far side of the moon, is going on inside.
Although the two scientists' theory on the moon being artificial and hollow did explain the many incongruities concerning the origins of the moon and how it arrived in Earth's orbit, there were other scientists looking at other data which caused them to rethink our lunar neighbor. Dr. Gordon MacDonald, a top scientist at NASA, said this in 1962 after studying the moon's motion.
If the astronomical data is reduced, it is found that the data require that the interior of the moon is less dense than the outer parts. Indeed, it would seem that the moon is more like a hollow than a homogeneous sphere.
Also, during the Apollo launches, the astronauts left seismometers on the surface of the moon. When the stage of the lunar lander fell to the surface, the seismometers rang for hours, indicating that the moon was hollow.
And they reckoned that a very highly advanced race had hollowed out the moon, and therefore, because there's so many anomalies about the moon, it's unbelievable. Therefore, it can be explained why, as one NASA scientist said, the moon is inside out. What's on the surface of the moon should be inside.
But one of the cases that's really, really fascinating is that on Apollo 16, they actually fired the lunar module, Orion, crashed it deliberately in to the surface of the moon, and used the seismometers from the other landing sites to record what happened. And what happened is the moon basically rang like a bell for about 14 hours, which indicates that it is, for the most part, probably hollow. In other words, there are vast caverns of space inside the moon, which just is not a thing that you would have in a natural body. You would have everything compressed. There just wouldn't be these massive cavities inside.
You look at the ancient tribes and the ancient accounts of various chroniclers who talk about the time before the moon was there. And you look at the Zulu accounts and many other accounts which talk of the moon in terms of being symbolically an egg. And I talked to a Zulu shaman, high shaman called Credo Mutwa, a long time ago. And I said to him, why do you symbolize the moon as an egg? And he said, because we say that it's been hollowed out, like a yolk taken out. That's why we symbolize it as an egg, which is what these Russian scientists were talking about. Then you have the Zulu legends of where the moon came from, that the Chitahuri, as they call them, the reptilian race, with two leaders called Wawani and Umpanku, stole the moon from the great python and basically positioned it where it is. And when you look at the descriptions of Wawani and Umpanku, the descriptions correlate with the descriptions of Enlil and Enki and the Anunnaki, descriptions of a non-human race visiting Earth that come from the area of Sumer and Mesopotamia.
So, in that whole sense of this, our moon being some kind of artificial construct that's not even necessarily from our solar system. And early on, NASA actually said that. They said that the moon was older than the Earth. I mean, they came up with some startling conclusions, which NASA has kind of backed away from now. Even the orbit that the moon is in is an unusual orbit. So it's things like this that make certain astronomers think, and researchers, that yeah, our moon is some kind of artificial satellite, like George Lucas' Death Star. Not to destroy us, as in the Star Wars Death Star movies, but